China just opened a bridge that sits 625 meters above a river. That is taller than the Empire State Building. It is more than twice the height of the tallest bridge in the entire United States. It was built using 22,000 tons of steel, the same weight as 3 Eiffel Towers, and it took roughly 3 years to construct in a place that engineers from every other country in the world looked at and said it could not be done. That is the Huajiang Grand Canyon Bridge, and the country that built it did not just build the tallest bridge on Earth, it built it as the latest in a network of 32,000 bridges across one of the most impossible terrains on the planet, in a province most Western viewers have never even heard of. Here's what makes this really interesting. The gap between what China is doing in bridge engineering and what the rest of the world is doing is not a small one. It is the kind of gap that makes you realize an entire industry has been quietly leapfrogged while nobody outside of China was paying attention. And once you see how this bridge was actually built, the way we think about what is physically possible in construction is never going to look the same again. If that sounds like something worth your time, hit like and subscribe so you do not miss when we cover the next mega project. Now let's get into exactly how China just built the tallest bridge in human history. The province nobody talks about. To understand why this bridge matters, you first have to understand where it was built, because the location is the entire story. The Huajiang Bridge is in Guizhou, a mountainous province in southwest China that most people outside the country could not point to on a map. Guizhou is not coastal, it is not flat, it is not rich. For most of its history, it was one of the poorest and most isolated regions in all of China. The terrain is the reason. Guizhou is built on a landscape of karst limestone mountains, deep gorges, and twisting river canyons. There are places in Guizhou where 2 villages can sit only a few kilometers apart in a straight line, but the actual drive between them takes hours of winding mountain road. For centuries, this geography kept Guizhou cut off from the rest of China. The economy could not grow because nothing could move. Goods could not be shipped, workers could not commute, tourists could not visit. The mountains were a wall. And then, starting in the early 2000s, the Chinese government made a decision that has now produced one of the most extraordinary engineering transformations on Earth. They decided to stop going around the mountains and start going straight through them and over them. To do that, they would need bridges. A lot of bridges, and not just any bridges. They would need bridges built at heights that nobody had ever attempted. The Huajiang Bridge is the latest answer to that decision, and it is the most extreme one yet. A bridge higher than a skyscraper. The numbers on this bridge are difficult to wrap your head around at first, so let's go through them carefully. The Huajiang Bridge has a deck that sits 625 meters above the Beipon River at the bottom of the canyon. In April of 2026, Guinness World Records certified the exact figure at 626.01 meters. To put that in perspective, the Empire State Building in New York City stands 443 meters from the ground to its rooftop. The Huajiang Bridge deck sits almost 200 meters higher than that. You could stack the Statue of Liberty on top of the Statue of Liberty on top of the Statue of Liberty, and the bridge would still be taller. It is so high that on most days, clouds form below the bridge deck. Drivers crossing it sometimes report that they cannot see the river underneath them at all. They are driving above the weather. The main span of the bridge stretches 1,420 meters across the canyon. The total length is 2,890 meters. It took roughly 22,000 tons of steel to build, which is the equivalent of 3 full Eiffel Towers welded into a single structure. And it replaced the previous record holder for tallest bridge in the world, the Beipon Bridge, which sits at 565 meters and is also located in Guizhou, on the same river. So China did not just break the world record for tallest bridge, it broke its own record, with its own bridge on its own river. That kind of casual dominance over a single field of engineering is not normal. It is what happens when an entire country decides that it's going to become the best in the world at one specific thing, and then it spends 25 years doing nothing but that. The engineering nobody else can do. Here is where the story gets technical, and also where it gets impressive. Building a suspension bridge across a canyon that deep is not just about making it tall, it is about making it survive. At 625 meters above a river, the wind conditions on the deck are nothing like what a normal bridge experiences. Gusts can hit from any direction at any time. Temperature swings between the top of the deck and the bottom of the canyon can be dramatic. The cables and towers have to hold their position through all of it, indefinitely, while supporting 4 lanes of highway traffic. The engineers solved this with a network of high-strength steel cables suspended from 2 enormous concrete and steel towers anchored deep into the limestone cliffs on either side of the gorge. The deck itself is made from a series of prefabricated steel sections that were assembled on the canyon walls and then connected together piece by piece across the open air. The construction process required cranes operating at heights where there is no safe place to stand. It required workers strapped into harnesses hanging hundreds of meters above an empty canyon, welding steel that swayed in the wind. It required mathematics so precise that the temperature of the steel had to be factored in to where each piece was bolted, because the metal expands in heat and contracts in cold by enough centimeters at that scale to throw the entire alignment off. And it had to be done without dropping a single major component into the river below, because at that height, a single piece of steel falling from the deck would hit the ground with the force of an artillery shell. China completed it in roughly 3 years. For comparison, the United Kingdom spent over a decade designing and building the Queen's Ferry Crossing in Scotland. That bridge cost approximately £1.35 billion. The Huajiang Bridge cost approximately £216 million. China built a taller, more difficult bridge for less than a sixth of the price, in a fraction of the time. The Western comparison nobody wants to talk about. The previous tallest bridge in the United States is the Royal Gorge Bridge in Colorado. It is a famous American landmark, built in 1929, and for decades it was promoted as one of the engineering wonders of the world. The Royal Gorge Bridge has a deck height of 291 meters above the Arkansas River. The Huajiang Bridge is more than twice as tall. China did not just beat the American record, it beat it by an amount large enough that the American record is no longer in the same conversation, and it is not even close. China now holds nearly half of the spots on the global list of the 100 tallest bridges on Earth. Almost all of them are in Guizhou. The province that the world ignored for centuries now contains more record-breaking bridges than the rest of the planet combined. That is what happens when a country decides to industrialize its own infrastructure capability at scale. The United States, by comparison, has not built a major new long-span bridge in decades. The American Civil Engineers Association has repeatedly given American infrastructure failing grades. While the West has been arguing about how to fund repairs to bridges built before the moon landing, China has quietly built 32,000 entirely new ones in a single province. That is the part of the story that has nothing to do with concrete or steel. It's about national priorities and what a country actually decides to build when it decides to build something.
The bridge that became a theme park. There is one more part of this story that nobody saw coming. When the Huajiang Bridge opened to traffic on September 28, 2025, the local government in Guizhou did something nobody expected. They turned the bridge into a tourist attraction. They built a glass floor walkway that lets visitors stand directly above the open canyon with nothing but a clear panel between their feet and the 625-meter drop. They installed an elevator that runs up the inside of one of the support towers, leading to a glass cafe at the top with panoramic views of the gorge. And then they did the most insane thing of all. They opened the world's highest bungee jumping platform from the bridge deck. Adventure tourists from around the world now come to Guizhou specifically to jump off this bridge. By spring of 2026, the Huajiang Bridge had attracted over 2.3 million visitors. Time magazine named it one of the world's greatest places of 2026. A bridge that was built primarily to cut a 2-hour drive down to 2 minutes for local commuters has now become a tourist destination that generates revenue independently of the infrastructure value it provides. That is the part of Chinese mega-project thinking that the West rarely matches. They do not just build the bridge, they build the bridge, the tourism economy around the bridge, the highway network that connects to the bridge, and the rural revitalization plan that uses the bridge to lift surrounding villages out of poverty. The bridge is not the goal, it is one piece of a much larger system. Where bridge engineering goes from here. The Huajiang Bridge is the tallest bridge in human history, but it will not hold that record forever, because China is not slowing down. There are at least a dozen other major bridge projects currently under construction or in the planning phase across Guizhou and the surrounding provinces. Each one is designed to push the engineering envelope further. Taller decks, longer spans, more extreme conditions. The province that nobody talks about is now the global laboratory for what is physically possible in bridge construction, and the engineers who built the Huajiang Bridge are already moving on to the next project with the next set of constraints in the next impossible canyon. The Western countries that used to lead the world in this field are no longer in the running. They are watching. The American Civil Engineers Association is publishing reports. European engineering firms are flying to China to study the techniques. The technology transfer is going in one direction only. And for a generation of engineering students growing up right now, the best bridges in the world to study are no longer in San Francisco, or in Scotland, or in France. They are in a poor mountain province in southwest China that 30 years ago had almost no paved roads at all. That is what the Huajiang Bridge actually represents. Not just a new world record, a new world.
That is the full story of the Huajiang Grand Canyon Bridge. 625 meters above a river, 22,000 tons of steel, 3 years of construction, the tallest bridge on Earth, and the latest in a network of 32,000 across a single province. If this video gave you something to think about, drop a like on it. It takes 1 second, and it genuinely helps more people find content like this. Subscribe if you are not already part of the channel, and hit the notification bell so you are always first to know when we cover the next big shift in the world of engineering. We want to hear your take in the comments. Would you actually drive across a bridge that high, or stand on the glass walkway looking 625 meters down? Let's talk about it below. We will see you in the next one.